keeping those in mind. But at the same time, we need to look out for the best interest of the long term and being able to combat all these issues. Red Dog Mine is a wonderful example of that private public relationship where they're able to employ locals in the region, and that circulates from the macro economy, the big economy that we talk, that circulates that dollar down into the micro economies where you have village residents that are spending money on local small businesses. So that's economics is a very interesting discussion to have in rural Alaska and here at home especially, and that's some of the stuff that we need to be careful about moving forward is having a plan that incorporates the circulation of the dollar locally.
Okay, thank you, Josiah. Elizabeth?
Unfortunately, with low oil prices and a global pandemic, our industry and our state's revenues have taken a really huge hit during the pandemic. The majority of the state's revenues, resource revenues, comes from our district. I think, protecting the right to those revenues, protecting our rights to be able to develop those resources is going to be really key to making sure that our district remains, in a strong position to be able to provide for our residents. I will say, during this pandemic, we've seen pretty tough hits to the oil industry and, to even the hospitality industry. However, the mining industry has been able to remain pretty stable, and I'm thankful for that for the Red Dog Mine and for the Northwest Arctic Borough. But I think the biggest thing is preparing our people for these jobs. Our people are our resources, and we need to enhance and protect their rights as workers and training opportunities so they can work these jobs to develop our resources. I think one way the state can, better help bring back jobs and help us rebound from this pandemic is by increasing the capital budget, even just a little bit. I know that's hard because we're facing a huge budget deficit but even just a little bit will fund some meaningful projects, and that could mean projects in our communities for roads and schools, airports, runways, and that means jobs in our communities. I think investing in vocational programs throughout the state and the district will help create a trained and prepared workforce. We have jobs on the oil fields and at the mine. We have the different construction projects in the future, looking at the Kivalina relocation project, potential A-Star projects throughout the North Slope, potentially the Ambler Road project. So there's going to be, potentially a lot of projects in the district, and we want to make sure that our residents are trained and ready to fill those jobs. And that, that kind of brings me back to education funding, and something that we can do is reauthorize the TVEP, the Technical Vocational Education Program funding for Ilisagvik and the Alaska Technical Center that also funds vocational funding throughout the rest of the state. But those are two really important educational institutions within our district that provide really amazing services to help train up our workforce.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Moving on, we all know now that racism is a big topic, an issue around the country right now. If elected, what will you be doing to address racism? Elizabeth?
Yeah, we've seen this year kind of the culmination of years and years of racism and discrimination throughout our country and even within our communities. My heart goes out to my fellow Black, Indigenous, and people of color because because, it's very real, and racism takes many different forms. It's not only the, outright discrimination or racism. It's the fact that it's 2020 and we still have communities without water and sewer. It's the fact that Indigenous people and women of color are facing higher maternity mortality rates. It just goes on and on. But I grew up immersed in my culture and immersed in our Inupiaq values, and I come from a place of love, and I feel very thankful for the type of upbringing and home that I had to be able to fully process this really, really hard discussion, because it affects so many people on so many different levels. I think the state can, definitely look into ways to where the state can better protect state employees, to where the state can, better protect our educators, better protect our different institutions throughout the state, while also healing and being able to come together and move forward. I think it's time that we really address the root of these issues, and our people deserve that. And, I really, really look forward to, learning from people who actually, know the answers and have dedicated their time and their lives to addressing these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Josiah?
Racism, any kind of discrimination that we're facing as a society is a very again, it's a very touchy subject, right? And at the end of the day, I think that people that have experienced this type of injustice, at the end of the day, really, I think they just want to be heard and given the opportunity to be understood. And I mean, you see it a lot, and I see it in our local entities when they hire, they do a cultural, a kind of a dip in the hot water as far as what our culture is. And when I worked over at the hospital, that was one of the things when we were flying in, doctors and nurses from across the country. One of the first things you had to do was take a cultural little course on body language and stuff like that. And so there's communication issues. There's just wanting to be heard, I think, is a big part. And then at the same time, right, we cannot pivot. We can't quit, no matter what our people have faced throughout the years. Famine, starvation. I mean, we're going back a couple hundred years now. There's a ever standing denominator, and that was that we never ever quit. And so intertwining that back into our youth, that you can't pivot, you can't quit, no matter what, no matter how hard it gets, you can't. And I think that's going to be important. And then again, back to the communication and being able to voice whatever traumas that we've gone through as a people is going to be, but not using it as a crutch, is going to be key for us to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Koinakpak. Now to wrap up, I wanted to give you both the chance to ask your opponent a question, and the answer can be up to 2 minutes. So please try to stick to 2 minutes. Elizabeth, we'll start with you, please.
Yeah, thank you. I will start off by saying, Josiah, I understand your experience throughout the district, and being a fellow young person. I really commend you for what you've been able to do on the borough level. And, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on, a real actionable items for addressing the budget, I agree that forward planning is really important, but I'm curious where you see, budget cuts having to be made, or where you see new revenues possibly coming from. Thank you so much.
Yeah, goeiedag for the question, and likewise, one of the things that I've always told folks that have been, hey, Josiah, you got my support, and so on and so forth, is that I think we're both very passionate people about what we believe, and both have an interesting opportunity to represent our people here. As far as actionable items, going back to education, we look at the difference in how the money's spent versus where the money comes from at the state level, right? When you've got a majority of the revenue coming from District 40, and then pouring back in a majority of the revenue is not spent in District 40. So as far as actionable plans, for example, one of the things that I want to look at, going back to education and its funding, if you go and look at school districts from a big picture, and North Slope Borough School District, we've got 8 villages, about 10,000 is the population. I don't know what the kids are exactly, and we're spread across many, many miles, and we've got one school district represented there. And so that's one superintendent, that's one at the admin level, that's one cost. And then you go down and you look at other places in the state where, for example, Prince of Wales, I think it is, they've got a 6,000 person population, and they've got 3 different school districts, and that's 3 different administrations, 3 different admin costs. And so we need to look at those type of cuts to be made to bring that balance back to the reinvestment in our district, because that's the majority of where the revenue comes from.
Okay. Thank you, Josiah. I wanted to give you some opportunity to ask Elizabeth a question if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we've hit on, given recent events with COVID and having had it and having got it, and looking back at the scenario of where I got it, where I think I got it, is as much as I practice social distancing, wash my hands, and good hygiene, wearing a mask, and going back to the discussion on a mask mandate, I know we've talked about it before, and that's something that, personally, I think if you can educate a society enough to let them know what's right and wrong, and give them that opportunity to own whatever solution that is. And going back to the mask mandate discussion, I'm opposed to a mask mandate. Can you hit a little bit more on where you stand on that and why?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for this question. Because I know at the last radio show we both participated in, I didn't have an opportunity to, give more details as to why, I said yes if the state were to ever implement a mask mandate. And, I don't think that's the path the administration is interested in going down. And that's okay, because, we're seeing our local communities, our tribes, and our boroughs exercise their right to be able to mandate a mask. And we've seen that in almost all of our communities in the district, and both our boroughs implementing mask mandates. And that's their right to do that. And, I think it's just really unfortunate how politicized this pandemic has become. I think, people's health and well-being is on the line, people's livelihoods, our kids aren't going to school. And there's just, it's just really unfortunate that we haven't been able to take control of our case counts, and that our schools are still closed, and that, people, restaurants and businesses, small businesses throughout the district and throughout the state are having to shutter and close down. And so I totally believe in personal responsibility. I believe that, if you agree with the scientists, and if you agree with the experts on COVID and the effectiveness of masks, then there's nothing to be worried about. But we're seeing really, really high case counts in both our regions throughout the entire state.